Minister Chambers, I congratulate you and wish you the best, and thank you all for being here today. I just want to ask, the percentage of people aged 65 and over living in rented accommodation has increased by 83% in the 2022 census. In view of that, has the government put any provisions in place to protect those over 65 and living in rental accommodation from unaffordable rent levels when they move into fixed incomes upon retirement, where their incomes may exceed social housing thresholds but fall significantly short of affording huge, expensive private rents? And I do note in your closing part of the statement you said provide increased resources for core public services, investing in a higher quality of life in Ireland for our people into the future. I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel for these people that are not going to be able to get out of that. So can you elaborate on that for me, please?
Maybe, Deputy, do you want me to take that? Because maybe
yes, please. Yeah. Yes,
it might be a bit more relevant to my own department. So I know Minister Chambers and I is also really aware of the issue that you referred to, of people who late in life find themselves in a position that they're don't own their own home, don't qualify for social and affordable housing, but rent is going up and maybe their rental accommodation is uncertain. So in terms of what we are doing in relation to it, I mean, that is why the funding that we're making available to the Department of Housing does matter so much. It's why we're trying to increase the availability of social and public housing year after year. It's also obviously why the rent control measures that have been brought in by Minister O'Brien, that were brought in by Minister Murphy before that, are an important part of how we try to maintain the affordability and stability of rent. So I'd point to those two particular measures as the way in which we're trying to, over time, deal with the very urgent matter that you're referring to.
And can you see that Minister O'Brien is going to have enough money then to build specifically homes for our ageing people, rather like in the likes of one beds and all of that, where we have single men, older widowed women, whatever? Like, we need to have some provision there for our older people rather than expecting them to be trying to rent all of the time. Sure. So can you see that?
Well, I know Minister, no, I take your point, but I know Minister O'Brien is aiming to do that. So if I look at the plans that I would be most familiar with in Dublin City Council, if I look at the mix of the homes that are being built by the City Council, they are predominantly focused in 1 and 2 bedroom units, and in many cases the focus is on 1 bedroom units to provide support for people who need the kind of accommodation you're referring to. So the answer to your question is by providing a housing mix that's mostly with a lot of focus on 1 bed units. It tries to provide stable accommodation for those who may find themselves homeless or risk of being homeless at the end of life, which of course is something we want to avoid happening.
At an affordable price, obviously, as well. With regard to our increasing age, and again I'm speaking on that because of my brief, but also I'm thinking of our age bracket is going to be very high by 2051, and I'm wondering what provisions for state pension funding have been put in place, or what's envisioned to ensure funds are available and preferably ring-fenced to cover this, Minister?
Well, this is the reason why ELS funding is going up by so much. It's one of the big reasons. And what is very clear to me now is that the demographic transition, which we used to think about being in the medium term or happening at some point in the future, is absolutely happening now. It's happening could talk about it in many different ways. It's happening in our health service, it's happening in our schools. And the reason why we do ELS forecasts is we say, what is the money that we will need to continue to be able to provide the same level of public services for a bigger population? And in the ELS forecasts that will be made available to the Department of Social Protection, it will include the ability, and does include the ability, to continue to pay pensions at their current level to a larger number of people in the future.
So funds will preferably be ring-fenced then as well?
Well, I didn't say they would be...
I'm asking you that.
No, well, I didn't say they're ring-fenced, because if we start ring-fencing funding for one group of people, then we're always faced demands then to ring-fence it for other group of people. But the way in which we try to deal with your point, which is an important point, is through the ELS funding that's made available to different government departments, and we have a forecast for what that will be for a few years in advance. We try to deal with it that way. And I have to say, the brilliant work that has been done, led by the Department of Finance, in setting up to 2 different funds. One of the funds that has been set up is exactly to deal with the impact of demographics, particularly when we get into the 2030s and 2040s. Minister Chambers will explain it better than I can, but what they are doing is setting up a fund and saying then the return from that fund in the years ahead will be used to deal with demographic costs that we will have at that point. And I believe that is an essential thing to do. And in the absence of that, the people who are doing budgets in the 2030s and 2040s won't have money for new policy measures and will barely have the money to stand still. And that's why putting money into these funds, and I know it's a complex and difficult argument to make, is essential for the long-term future of this country.
Mr. Chambers, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, as Minister Donoghue has said, we have a major demographic challenge in our country. Our population pyramid over previous years was defined as being very much from a young, wide base in terms of the population pyramid. That's now ageing quickly, and we're seeing our population ageing comparatively in a very accelerated way compared to European countries that have a higher age demographic. And that's why the establishment of the Future Ireland Fund and the Infrastructure, Climate and Nature Fund, but particularly the Future Ireland Fund, is there for the medium to long term, so that future governments have the ability to intervene with savings from today and addressing the demographic challenges of tomorrow. And as Minister Donoghue said, we're seeing those demographic challenges present right now, even in terms of the acute hospital admissions, and obviously we have to provide for that in the context of existing levels of service. But that's really why important we get a balanced budgetary strategy, so that we put the excess tax receipts aside to deal with the challenges that you've referenced. And it's also why, in the context of housing policy and other areas of expenditure, that we drive progress around to make sure for an ageing population that they're provided for. And I know Minister O'Brien has sought to address that through the Housing for All plan. But that's why, when we're discussing budgetary policy, it's important that I think we don't enter into the domain of spending those funds to fund current expenditure measures, and that's why the government has established the funds, why we'll have 10 billion put aside this year, 16 billion euro next year, and again we want to add to that in future years, so that we address the demographic challenges, but also the other challenges that are there: deglobalisation, to the disruption of our trading position, which could happen. We know digitalisation and AI, how that impacts the labour force, and also the absolute need to address climate change and invest in the future. So there are wide challenges which we have to address. Demographics being one.
I appreciate that, and I
appreciate the fact that you've raised this issue.
There's another question, and I suppose basically I get what you're saying, but we're talking about the homeless, and they're an ageing population as well. We have a lot of homeless people who are older as well. So while you're mentioning homeless and you're mentioning health, we have a lot of people who can't get into hospitals as well. So we need to maybe do better around that. I'm going to finish with this. You said here that the health is almost 24.2 billion next year, and that the Minister for Health and the HSE, and all parties, recognise the importance of demonstrating the link between funding and delivery. I get the hives when I think of a health budget at the minute when I look at the Children's Hospital. So can someone elaborate a little bit more on that for me, please?
So the 24.2 billion euro refers to where we are with current funding. It doesn't take any account of where we are with capital funding. With relation to the National Children's Hospital, I am confident that despite the many difficulties we've had with that project and the many issues which we acknowledge we need to handle in a different way, when that hospital is open and running, it's going to make a massive difference to the health of children.
At a massive cost, Minister, and huge lessons have to be learned from that.
Sure, I said to you in my answer to your question, I accept those answers, the lessons we have to learn from it. But look, on the other hand, now that we publish a cost span for huge projects, But we then receive commentary in relation to, well, the cost of these projects is too big. So we acknowledged what went wrong, we've aimed to fix it, and while I deeply regret some of the issues that happened in the hospital along the way, and I've acknowledged my role in it on multiple occasions, I equally know that when we have that hospital opened and staffed, children will be getting better healthcare. They'll recover quickly, they'll have healthier and better lives, and that's a goal worth going for.
Thank you, Chair.